organization should prioritize a mindset of risk awareness and preparedness across all levels, departments, and functions. It would help identify and resolve both unknown as well as known challenges in a proactive manner. Similarly, it's important to build a thought leadership mindset as it helps to foster problem solving, adaptation, as well as resilience to emerging challenges. I would say the importance of designing and framing a comprehensive risk management framework, probably based on global standards like ISO 31000, COSO, Basel III, and whichever the organization choose to select. The emphasis should be right from risk identification, discovery, comprehensive risk assessment to focus on adapting and selecting right mitigation strategies.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Café Season 2, The Strategy Brew. I am Aarti Kapri, your host for this episode on our risk podcast series. In the last episode, we discussed various aspects of business risk and how to make a strategy to be successful in business. In the current episode, we will be simplifying the often used risk terminologies and their significance. I have with me Mr. Steve D'Souza, who is the Chief Risk Officer in ICICI Lombard, who has almost 2 decades of experience in risk management. Mr. Steve is with ICICI Lombard for almost 5 years. Welcome, Steve, on today's episode. I hope today's video will help our audience to enrich their knowledge on the risk terms predominantly being used across the globe. Thank you for joining us on IL Cafe.
Thanks, Aarti, for having me over for this discussion. It's my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
I'd like to begin with by discussing some key risk terms that have become quite prominent like grey rhinos, black swans, and VUCA world. Can you help us break down these terms and what do they actually mean and how do they apply in today's risk landscape?
It's a very interesting topic to begin with. The complexity of today's business environment has indeed led to the emergence of these captivating terms. Let's look at them with some real world context. Let's begin with the term VUCA word, which signifies volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which was coined way back in 1987 by the US Army, but even today highlights how the complex and interconnected world can compound risk and create a challenging environment for businesses, individuals, and livelihoods. If you look at these elements, let's look at volatility, which can be best described with the share market. We all know that it carries an inherent risk of ups and downs. But if you look at the VIX, which is the volatility index, the average in the 2010s was around 10 to 14, but moved significantly higher in the 2020s and even spiked to all the way to 80 plus. If you look at uncertainty, the technology advancement, specifically the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence, has led to a certain level of uncertainty for multiple businesses. If you look at the advertising and the marketing industry, there is uncertainty for the demand for designers, content creators, and the overall traditional marketing agencies. Let's look at complexity. The Russia-Ukraine war is the best example of how any form of disruptions in the global supply chain can create significant consequences for the supply of essential commodities and lead to complex economic challenges. From an ambiguity perspective, the global risks that we see because of the regulatory ambiguity today. More than 50 countries went into record elections, and there were also turmoils in large governments like Germany, France, Canada. Even if we look at some of the regulations around the use of cryptocurrencies and artificial intelligence, let's take an example. Countries like El Salvador has embraced cryptocurrencies, while some others like China has completely banned it. There is also a concern as artificial intelligence and the regulations for governing this is still to be finalized by most countries. Now let's look at the second term, black swan. Black swan events are unpredictable, very high impact incidents which you can analyze only in retrospect. The 9/11 terrorist attack is a good example of a black swan event. The New York Stock Exchange and Nasdaq was closed for 4 days, which is the longest shutdown since the Great Depression. The incident led to an estimated $40 billion in insurance claim, which is considered one of the most expensive events in insurance history. And if we look at a broader global and societal impact, the US launched a war on terror, followed by the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, which had significant economic and global consequences. Now let's look at the third term, grey rhinos. Grey rhinos are a bit different than black swan events. Grey rhinos, again, probable high impact events, but are mostly ignored or overlooked unless they lead to a crisis. That's exactly what happened during the 2008 global financial crisis. Analysts and economists had warned of the vulnerabilities in the global financial system, but policymakers and financial institutions continued to ignore these warnings. When the bubble burst, it led to a cascading financial meltdown, triggering a global recession, massive unemployment, and even the downfall of some of the largest institutions like the Lehman Brothers. Another very popular example I can think of in recent terms, which is the massive outage due to the faulty software update by the cybersecurity firm CloudStrike. It led to an outage of approximately 8.5 million systems worldwide, with a financial estimated loss of $10 billion. More than 7,000 flights had to be cancelled or delayed. There were thousands of medical procedures which were postponed or delayed. And most institutions, whether financial and other industries, saw system outages which impacted their business operations. Today, we are definitely in a VUCA world where such crises can come anytime and organizations should be prepared to face that.
That was really informative, Steve. I have much clearer understanding of these complex terms now. While polycrisis first emerged in 1970, its relevance has surged in light in today's interconnected global challenges. Similarly, permacrisis was word of the year in 2022. It's reflecting a sense of ongoing unrelenting crisis. How do you see the evolution of these terms? And how do they each capture the complexities of the current global situation?
So the term polycrisis was introduced by Edgar Morin in 1970s, but has started gaining attention recently as we face complex global challenges. So what is polycrisis? Basically, it's an overlap of crisis leading to a ripple effect. So if we look at the pandemic, it just didn't impact human health, but led to massive disruption in the global supply chain, eventually leading to economic challenges globally. There were category 3 floods in Florida last year, with massive floods, property damages impacting the local economy. Even if we look at the Israel Hamas conflict or the growing tensions in the Middle East, it has led to disruptions in the entire region. If you look at the world since the last 5 years, maybe since 2020, we are in a constant state of permacrisis with significant human, economic, and environmental implications. In fact, if we look at India, we can take a step back and start with 2016-17 when actually demonetization kicked in. What we saw was a large scale impact in India, specifically on the informal sector, eventually impacting the GDP growth rate in India. While things started looking northwards, in 1920 we had the pandemic, which led to a global emergency, halting economic growth worldwide. In 2021, to address the slowdown, countries across the globe started printing currency and pumping money to revive economic growth. In 2022, when the growth started picking up, central bankers were forced to increase interest rate to tame inflation and regulate the money supply. Not only that, in the beginning of 2022, we also saw the Ukraine Russia war, which again led to an increase in the price of energy and food, further escalating the inflation across economies. Since 2023, we've been in a constant state of high interest regime. While some countries have started reducing the interest rate, we still to reach the growth rates of pre-COVID levels in most economies. While these are some of the prominent events, we continue to see a manifestation of emerging risk. Let's take an example, climate risk. 2024 is recorded as the hottest year ever. There have been more than 45 countries with large-scale floods. If you look at cyber risk, which is rated amongst the top 3 by global business leaders, there has been an increase of 30% cyber attacks year on year. The cost of cybercrime is an estimated 8 trillion in 2023, which is anticipated to increase till 11 trillion in 2025 and all the way to 15 trillion till 2029. While Gen AI is a current problem that we are seeing, the world is already talking about quantum computing and its potential to disrupt the encryption methodologies that are in use today, while threatening data, communication, infrastructure, and systems globally, which are the backbone of today's digital connected ecosystems. So, whether it is perma or poly crisis, what we need today is a more holistic risk management approach to deal with these crises.
That was really insightful, Steve. The kind of examples you gave about COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine war, in order to make us understand about poly crisis and perma crisis, that was indeed very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Can you throw some light onto the strategies which organizations should adapt to identify and prepare for such potential risks?
Recognizing that there have been multiple black swan events as well as grey rhino events in the past, and that these will continue in the future as well, organizations should focus on building resilient, adaptive, and proactive risk management strategies. Some of the thoughts that come to my mind are first and foremost, I would say, is building a risk aware and an innovative culture. Organizations should prioritize a mindset of risk awareness and preparedness across all levels, departments, and functions. It would help identify and resolve both unknown as well as known challenges in a proactive manner. Similarly, it's important to build a thought leadership mindset as it helps to foster problem solving, adaptation, as well as resilience to emerging challenges. Secondly, I would say the importance of designing and framing a comprehensive risk management framework, probably based on global standards like ISO 31000, COSO, Basel III, and whichever the organization choose to select. The emphasis should be right from risk identification, discovery, comprehensive risk assessment to focus on adapting and selecting right mitigation strategies. Another important component would be ensuring that the risk tolerance levels across domains are defined and what is the key risk indicators that need to be measured so that you get an lead indicator when you see something going southwards. Another important element as part of the framework should be horizon scanning, as it's important to identify emerging risk, trends, and opportunities. The third critical element is scenario planning and stress testing. Multiple what if scenarios with extreme events should be designed and test it so that you know what can go wrong when these things happen. The fourth point that comes to my mind is redundancy and building diversification into the strategy. It's important to analyze businesses from a concentration risk perspective and avoid over reliance on a single revenue stream, partner, business operations, etc. History has shown, for example, organizations like Nokia, we did not see the threats coming due to concentration risk. Even today, we can see challenges with the pharma industry due to over reliance on APIs. If you look at the technology and the automobile industry, its dependency and the challenges that it faced because of short supply of semiconductor chips. The next point that comes to my mind is importance for organizations to invest in early warning systems. Data is the new oil or the gold. In fact, they say the data can speak to you if you are listening. It's important to organizations to use some of the latest technologies that are available today, like AI, ML, so that you can build on your data analytic capabilities, which can help you detect weak signals which could precede a crisis. And the last point that I would like to touch upon is the importance of crisis management planning and testing. History says that a crisis will hit you when you least expect it to happen. The difference between a market leader and the others would be the organization's ability to face those challenges and come back to business in the shortest and the most efficient manner. And hence, it's important for organizations to regularly test their business continuity, disaster recovery, and other crisis management plans. In fact, there's a very famous saying by Malcolm X: the future belongs to those who prepare for it today.
Thank you so much, Steve, for shedding light on these complex terms and the current risk environment. I appreciate our viewers for joining us today. I hope all of you have found this discussion insightful and engaging. As we wrap up, I'd like to give you a sneak peek into our next episode, where we will delve into the risk management frameworks and effective strategies to sail through the multiple crises we all are facing. Effective risk management is vital, and we are excited to share some invaluable insights from our leading experts in the field. Be sure to tune in, you won't want to miss it. Thank you.